And now, please welcome co-founder and CEO of Le Collectionist, Max Aniort, and co-founder and CEO of Guesty, Amiad Soto, in conversation with Skift Senior Hospitality Editor Sean O'Neill.
Hello, everyone. Yes, we're in the spotlight. For this conversation, we're going to get some new perspectives on innovation in the sector. So, Amiad, thank you for joining us. Max, thank you for being here.
Thanks.
So we're going to quickly level set on who these companies are in case people aren't familiar. So Max, first, what is Le Collectionist?
So yeah, Le Collectionist is the leading company in Europe for luxury property rental with services. We operate in 30 destinations. We have 8 different offices. The average basket is 30K. It starts like from 10K a week up to our biggest booking this year was like 3 million euros for 3 months in Verbier in Switzerland. So yeah, it's pretty much high end. And the size of the company is like 150 million GBV this year.
Great. And tell us about Guesty.
Yeah, so Guesty, an end-to-end software platform for managing short-term rentals at anything from individual hosts up to big enterprises like Le Collectionist and more, doing all types of products to help our property managers do it more efficiently, from guest communication, accounting, payments, and much more.
Okay. There's some inspirational videos of Guesty if you're interested in the startup saga. Like you and your brother, you started with cleaning toilets, and
Yep.
It's a very basic option. And
Well, we started as property managers and had to deal with emergency cleanings ourselves. So I remember the days of cleaning, a couple apartments just because the cleaner didn't show up. And being computer geeks, we just really leaned much more into building technology. So over the years, we just stopped doing our own property management and focused more on building software.
Oh, and you just recently raised your Series F funding. It was about 130 million?
Something like that.
Something like that, okay. And so how big are you relative to your competitors? Like, let's say your second biggest competitor, like how big are you?
Well, one thing that we were also part of Y Combinator, and one of the things I learned there is that companies never get killed by homicide, they always get killed by suicide. So we never focus on our competitors that much, and we keep focusing on ourselves. But if you're trying to compare, I would look at like employees count, for example. Guesty has now 850 people worldwide. And looking at many of our competitors, they're like getting to 100, maybe. Mm-hmm. So that's one way of comparison. But we really don't focus that much on our competitors and focus much more on our customer feedback and how can we make their life a lot better.
Okay. Consumer demand trends is something that we've been following. We heard from Jamie from AirDNA earlier talking about how in the luxury and whole home space, there's a lot of strength in ADRs, average daily rates. So at Le Collectionist, you were talking about, $30,000. This is like true luxury. So what are you seeing in terms of demand for the rest of the year?
I guess so. There was a big switch on our audience in Europe. One more time, operating essentially in Europe in terms of destinations. But we have more and more US travelers that came back only a year ago in Europe, really focusing on high-end destinations. So the ones I think that everyone knows, like the iconic ones like Saint-Tropez, Courchevel, Verbier, Ibiza. And the average basket is up.
The average basket size is up?
Yeah, since the beginning of the year. And for us, where we see a drop in demand is more like the affordable luxury destinations, where we had like more like European guests coming from France, the UK, and where now I think they're struggling more and more to rent our properties. And I think it's a vicious circle in terms of marketplaces where there are more and more supply. Also, the owners re-impact the cost and the inflation in the cost they had for the past few years. But on the other hand, like the guests are now wealthiest every year. Well, some of them are, but not all of them. So I guess it's a marketplace. So at one moment, the price will be there will be some price adjustments, not necessarily in the very high-end part, so above 50K a week for us, but more like in the affordable luxury part, so 10K a week.
Okay. And so in the software space, like what is the view of the opportunity for consolidation? We have possibly one of the slides about some of the M&A you did, which you recently acquired, Rentals United, which was another player in the space.
That's our
talk about M&A.
Yeah. So that was our seventh acquisition, and we've been very acquisitive. I feel like I've spoke about it many times that this industry is super fragmented, and knowing how much resource we invest just in each functionality, I understand that it doesn't make any sense for all of us to build the same things, right? So pulling resources together to build better products for our customers just makes a lot more sense. So when we talk to companies, we always look at how good is their DNA, how fit is it to the Guesty DNA, how are their unit economics look like, and what's the strategy to consolidate. And we did in the past, I think 3 years, 7 M&As, and I think that won't be the last one. We most likely will continue to do so, and we have a healthy pipeline of more companies we keep talking to. And it really is about checking off those 3 items that I mentioned. And Rentals United was a perfect company. We've been a partner of them for the past 7 years. We know the company and the founders for a really long time, and we really loved working with them. And talking to them about that really developed over time, and we are very excited about the opportunities.
You've had a very good ground game, so to speak, about getting organic growth, whether it's the mom and pop operators or the mid-term operators. But now in order to sustain growth, I think you need to have the air game in order to get sort of more the enterprise kind of players.
Yeah,
and that's it's a different customer, different market. So what makes you feel confident you can do that?
It's not different market. It is different sales process and different type of customizations of the product. And I feel like our job is actually to take companies young and help them scale and become enterprises themselves, but also there's a lot of enterprises who grew up on other platforms, and why shouldn't they also benefit from the platform we've built? So in the last few years, we really scaled that part of our business dramatically, and we have shifted resources on the process of closing enterprises, a lot more a la carte, a lot more like nuanced, and things like that. So we are very excited about that part too, and I think that many enterprises in the market are actually might be even using Guesty and you didn't know about it, just because our API approach has been very key to some of those platforms who want to grow. So,
API approach meaning you're open to playing with other players and integrating and sync.
And that too, but also for many enterprises want to build their own front ends to own some of that piece. We actually encourage big companies to build their front end with their guests and owners, and kind of like outsource the rest to us. But we give them a full API suite so they can build whatever they choose to. So they can either use our front end, they can build their own, they can take whatever they want.
Okay, thanks for explaining that. So Max, I'll ask a similar question about consolidation in your segment of property, your segment. So you've done, how much M&A have you done?
5 acquisitions in total.
Okay.
I guess it's about competition, I think, and it's something we already talked about, but of course our direct competition are more like what we call the local champions, and most of the time like amazing property managers that have created amazing companies along the years in one destinations or multiple destinations. But I think it would be narrow also to think like that, and also all the luxury hotels, or some also like Amiad or even Club Med. We have a focus on family groups. So yeah, I think it's a bit wider than just short-term rental companies. But we acquired like companies where we thought that it was too complicated to open the market. So for instance, the leading company in Switzerland, and sometimes just companies to consolidate the market where we're already quite strong, and just to be able to accelerate our growth.
I have to imagine integration is key. I mean, it's fine to do the M&A. The Financial Times, they will say like more than half of all deals, actually destroy value. So what is it about, how is it that you manage to make things work?
Well, I guess I completely agree with you. Like the first test is like a first date test. Do you want to take another drink with this person? And most of the time you do see that the companies have kind of, the DNA comes from the founder or the founders. And so if you get along with them, I think it's a real good first test. But after more and more, I guess you have to be quite strict with what you will offer. You have to have all the hard discussions before to be quite also aligned on the integration process and what's the target. But it's a complicated process. For me, I find it like very challenging, and it's something that you don't really you don't have a recipe of success for every acquisition. Because all the time it's also different from one culture to another. You have different offices. All our acquisitions were made abroad, so just having this French accent makes it more complicated. Thank you. That was not a joke. No. No, I think it's really to understand like it's only people and communication. So at the end, you cannot always standardize everything, and so integration is very challenging.
I like to add to that and say, like, I think of it more as a muscle. Like, to give an example, our first acquisition, MyVR, took us to integrate like north of a year and a half. And our one before the last one, Kigo, took us like half of that time. So it's like we improved our processes over the 5 following M&As. And I think that we also look at it as kind of like some are not successful, some are successful. But I think that if we do M&As in areas that we are very knowledgeable on, the chances of a miss are very, very low versus experimental M&As. And we done one experimental M&A where we didn't really know the market, but we wanted to learn more. And obviously, we learned a lot. So that's a challenge achieved, but it wasn't as financially beneficial as we would hoped it would. But we learned a lot about that so I think that for us, it is a muscle, and it is really about knowledge of the market that you're growing into. So if you're completely out of the water, the chances of a miss would be like rolling the dice.
So, Amiad, you recently had a Series F round, so a lot of times that's a signal that an IPO might be next. What is next for you, for the company?
Yeah, so it is a signal for companies that are VC-backed, and we are VC-backed. So we see IPO as another milestone and not the end goal. And potentially we will decide to go public when the market is more receptive to companies that, at our industry. I think that the market start to open up for more software businesses. And I think that over the next, let's say, 12 to 18 months, we'll see more and more businesses going public, and then we'll be ready by then. I think that the team has already worked really hard to get us to a stage where we could be a public company, and that's within our cards. I think that the reason for us to go public is mostly for more currency to do more of these consolidation deals, because we don't necessarily need to. And many of our rounds included additional secondary rounds to give liquidity to employees and early investors, so it's not the reason to go public is liquidity. It's mostly to get extra currency to do more type of deals and give us a lot more accessibility to cash.
What would the future M&A, I understand what the M&A to date has done, but like for the future M&A, is it just sort of getting to geographic presence so you get the customer base of these things? Because you already have a fairly full function suite, so what more do you need?
So we have 3 theses around M&As. Some of it is supply, and you saw that with the Kigo deal where it's a legacy product. We understand the type of customer. We believe that type of customer would benefit more in being on the Guesty platform. And we actually absorbed the entire staff in Guesty and helped them train on our software. And many of them are still working on many projects in Guesty. And that's a great example of a good acquisition. We also have a couple more theses that we run. Some of them are still experimental, as I mentioned. Some of them are geographical presence, as you mentioned. But we're definitely much less into buy for technology than we were in the past.
Okay, that's very helpful. So Max, I guess what strikes me with your company is like, because a point that came up in one of the earlier conversations is that the rental space got shaped by distribution first, and people talk about they stay in an Airbnb, and that became a place, and so it caused sort of like this very long shadow. You have these online players like at the high end, and that has like made it difficult for small individual players to come up. But in the course of today, we've been hearing about different smaller brands that are finding their little niche in white space, whether it's Plum Guide and Boutique and Lake Collectionist. So what is it that we should understand that by targeting, like, for example, your high-end niche and how you're delivering it, that you feel like you can hold your own despite being in the shadow of the giants?
I think, and that's the main reason why we created the company was that the owners wanted to look for other platforms. They didn't want to be listed on the same platform like another apartment that was more
like a One Fine
mass
Stay
market.
or something.
Exactly. And also there is a layer of service on both sides of the marketplace. So for the owners and for the guests, we have a concierge service when we do operate the properties. So in a way, being property managers, we can do the grocery shopping. We can have a chef. We can have a Michelin star chef if we want, a ski instructor, a yoga teacher, nanny, or French instructor, whatever you need, we can provide, if it is legal. Yeah, we're operating also in Ibiza and Mykonos, so I think it's important to say. So no, and at the end, these people are very busy. They don't need the money. A part of our population in terms of guests and owners are billionaires. So it's really, I think, a vision of having an asset, being entrepreneurs, and just to be sure that this asset doesn't cost money. This asset also doesn't depreciate in time. And so it's just a way to maintain the asset with a good value. So at the end, they are just also entrepreneurs, investors. So on our end, these guys are not going on other platforms, really. We are 75% direct, 25% indirect. The indirect part is more like luxury concierge services, strategic partnerships, plastic surgeons, so it can come from anywhere. But it's just, finding the right networks and communities.
Makes sense. And one of your investors, like, I'm going to mispronounce the name, but the Pignot family, the famous luxury brand. So like a lot of players are paying attention to Lake Collectionist. We have some audience questions. So for Guesty, how does Guesty think about accumulating technical debt when acquiring companies, especially given the challenges of scaling?
Yeah, so that's one of those muscles that we had to go through. When we buy a competitor that's a legacy platform, we don't necessarily think of their technological debt as something we need to fix, but instead that we need to sunset. We still need to maintain it until we actually sunset the company. So that's a challenge, but we've been very successful in making sure that those products remain active for the duration of the migration, and that's been very helpful.
Okay. To what extent is Guesty buying growth versus organically growing?
Most of our growth has been organically. M&As are obviously an accelerator, but whenever we report our KPIs to our investors, we separate them anyway. So it's not like we're not growing, we need to buy companies to facilitate growth. No, not at all. In fact, our organic growth has been accelerating over the years. So we're only accelerating it further. That's how we look at it.
Having been a participant, been lucky and fortunate enough to be allowed to be in the short-term rental summits that we've done for the past half dozen years, I do feel a little bit more cynical and jaded than when I started, because so many of the guests that were on stage no longer are around to come back. And one of the things is they have trouble getting over that hump of, while you're in growth mode and you don't have to be profitable, and then getting to the, let's say, like with a Sonder, getting to a public markets and having to report quarterly. What makes you feel confident that you can sort of like make that transition? Like you mentioned earlier, you're supplementing sort of the board and some of the skill sets for that.
Yeah, so first of all, we're very close to being profitable. We'll be profitable most likely by the end of this year. And we have enough cushion for a lifetime. So it's not a problem. To be honest, the fundraise that we just did was completely not for our own sake, was just for acquisition targets. So that's not a problem.
Okay, that's great. For Max, I think you mentioned this, but what is the average ticket of Lake Collectionist?
Yeah, it's 30K for a stay. And
is that euro, I guess, or 30K euro?
30, yeah.
They're very close now.
They are, it's sad to say. And at what point, Max, would growing and scaling, does profitability become the key driver? Sort of similar question for you.
We were profitable at one moment, like during COVID. I think like a lot of people, we didn't hire much in April 2020 to operate during the summer season. So we had to manage with the people we had. And so we became profitable in 2020. And we raised some money also 2 years ago with Highland, 60 million euros. To be able to scale. So for the past 2 years, we had a scaling plan. So it means more investments, but to be honest, we're break even. Yeah.
Okay.
So we're always very careful with this money. And same thing, the fundraising was mainly dedicated to acquiring new companies.
Okay. One for you, Amiad. So is Guesty a SaaS company, or are the service software as a service company, or are there plans on being a services company, like for credit card processing, insurance, ancillary services?
Yeah, so we see ourselves as a real platform that has a lot of different products. Part of that products are also the fintech. Last year we launched our own Guesty Pay solutions, both in the US and in Europe, and also Guesty Shield, which is a damage protection product. So I feel like over the years, we went to our customers and heard what they need. And our job is, because we are already integrated with more than 250 partners in our marketplace, our job is mostly to bring them as much as possible to be utilized from the same platform. Why? Because many of our customers are not tech savvy. They are not looking to go to 7 different platforms. And even with our partners, we give them more APIs for the year, so their data can be accessed from Guesty as well. So their team doesn't need to be trained on different products as well. So we do have more products that we launched that are fintech, but we are a software as a business product. Even with payments, it's a software product. It's not like we are actually a bank. We do work with banks to provide that piece of software, but it is eventually just software.
And Max, I guess, to what extent do you have sort of like a defensible moat? It seems like the model could be something, now that you've sort of proven the case, someone else could come in and I can super serve. Aman could come in,
Mine was there maybe 20 years ago. I think that was the first one to do houses in their hotels, and now it's beginning to be a bit struggle for them. But no, I guess it's really when we define ourselves. The target is to build a luxury brand in hospitality, and I think at the end, building a brand might be the best also barrier for competition. Today, people are coming because, or even are staying in a Le Collectionist home, and they feel like it's an achievement in some ways, like having a Bottega Veneta bag or whatever, a Rolex. So it's just putting money somewhere else, but it's the whole experience. It's not only listing the properties. We have this 8 different offices where we have underground teams. So we're operators at the end, so you have to create this network to find the owners to serve them properly. We have a huge repeat rate. It's above 30% in our mature destinations. So I guess at the end, building this brand is really the main barrier.
Well, I think maybe that's the point we draw on. You were a member of Y Combinator, and Paul Graham was one of the leaders there, and he had a saying that the difference between a good programmer and a great programmer is like logarithmic. It's very significant, and so it sounds like in terms of branding and your strategy, it's about the difference between being good and great is your positioning. Thanks very much, Amiad. Thank you, Max, for being here for doing this.
Sure.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.